In the summer of 1988, 27-year-old Deborah Honeywell was at a crossroads. After ending a relationship with the father of her infant daughter, the Orlando, Florida native was ready for a change.
I was very much in love with my daughter's father, but it just didn't work out. So I felt very depressed, very hurt, very insecure.
So when her brother in West Palm Beach offered to have her work at his fireworks business for a few weeks, Deborah jumped at the chance.
I was in a floral business, but during the summertime, it slows down dramatically. My brother said he needed help, and I thought it was good that I got away from my daughter's father for a little while.
But just a few days after arriving, Deborah couldn't help noticing one of her new co-workers, Scott Erskine.
He was at my brother's house. He had come in. Scott was a very good-looking man. When he smiled, he reminded me of the Tom Cruise look.
The 25-year-old seemed quite taken with Deborah, too, as he laid on the charm.
There was a lot of flirting.
Let's go get together.
He gave me all kinds of attention, and it took my mind off of my daughter's father.
When the summer ended, so did their brief one-month fling. Deborah let Scott down gently and prepared to head back home to reopen her floral business. But Scott wasn't about to give up so easily.
Scott followed me back to Orlando, and he pulled up right behind me. I felt like he was disrespecting me.
I told you, I can't do this, okay?
But I thought it was more like puppy love. He got attached, and he didn't want to let go.
Scott left immediately, and Deborah didn't hear from him for weeks, until she received an unexpected phone call.
I had gotten a call from a nurse at a hospital, and she claimed that he was walking down the street and had collapsed.
Hey, is he all right?
Scott got on the phone.
Are you okay?
Well, no.
And said he had a broken neck in the past, and that he had a wire in his neck and it re-broke. I was like, you know, a person doesn't survive this.
With no one else to turn to, Scott pleaded with Deborah to let him stay with her as he recovered. She relented, but not before doing a little homework.
The hospital wouldn't release him unless somebody picked him up. I felt kind of sorry for him, basically. But I was concerned with my daughter in the house, so I went to the police department and did a background check on him. And he came up clean.
That September, Scott moved in with Deborah. And to her surprise, he was a welcome source of company.
They put a halo vest on him, and that was a little devastating to see, but he was helping me out in my business. We were becoming closer, and he was just great with my daughter. Scott made me feel wanted, secure. I really started to fall in love with him.
Debbie seemed excited about Scott. Her happiness level instantly rose, and she seemed to be much more motivated to start going on with her life.
When the halo vest finally came off, Deborah was thrilled when Scott surprised her with a marriage proposal.
It was perfect. I felt so secure about my feelings for him, for his feelings for me, so I said yes.
Then, just 2 months later, Deborah had a surprise for Scott.
I'm pregnant.
Really?
I didn't know if I was so ready for that, but he was thrilled.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
The couple decided to tie the knot quickly, and a few weeks later, Deborah was escorted down the aisle and into the arms of her beloved.
It was absolutely gorgeous. Everything seemed picture perfect.
She was very happy, super excited. They looked like a very happy couple.
I thought everything was going good. You know, I was gonna have that secure relationship that I've always wanted.
But before long, Deborah and others would find themselves forced into unimaginable darkness as Scott revealed the evil within.
I can't believe a man's capable of that.
I just thought, oh my God, I was scared to death.
In the winter of 1989, Deborah Erskine and her new husband Scott were preparing for the birth of their first child.
We went into our typical everyday life, pretty much right away. Everything was going good.
But just a few weeks into their marriage, Deborah began noticing subtle changes in Scott's behavior.
I didn't like him smoking, and he insisted on smoking in the house. And he definitely started drinking more.
Please don't smoke in the house.
When I confronted him about it, he said, "Get off my back, I can do what I want."
This is my house. I make the rules.
While he'd once complimented Deborah, Scott was now quick to cut her down.
Man, you got fat.
What? I'm pregnant, not fat.
Debbie told me those things, and I feared that Debbie was going to be let down again, hurt again, and be stuck with 2 children now.
Deborah couldn't understand what was happening to her husband. Then, less than a month later, Deborah came home after grocery shopping and immediately sensed that something was wrong.
I normally keep the curtains open, and I noticed the curtains were closed.
It's too dark in here.
It's not too dark. I want them closed. Don't tell me what to do.
So I walked into the bedroom,
Come back here.
and Scott was right behind me, and he pushed me on the bed. He wrapped his hands around my neck, and I started trying to fight him off. He kept choking me, and the more I fought him, the more he pressed down on my neck.
I'll kill you. I'll kill all of you.
The look in his eyes was just a look that you never forget. And as I'm trying to get away from him, he kicked me in the stomach. When he kicked me, I knew there was something wrong with the baby.
With her own life and the life of their unborn child at stake, Deborah made a desperate attempt to get away.
My family lived in the same subdivision. I needed to get out of there and get to their house. I don't even know how I got away.
Deborah ran out of the house screaming, unaware that Scott was only moments behind her.
I really thought he's gonna kill me.
She was gasping for air. She said, "He's coming to kill us all."
In the spring of 1989, Deborah Erskine was 5 months pregnant and running for her life from her husband, Scott.
I was running as hard as I could to get away from him. And I got to my family's house.
The front door flies open, and Debbie falls halfway in, and she's gasping for air. And I ran over to pick her up, and she managed to get the words out. "He's coming to kill us all."
He's coming to kill us!
And Scott drove up right after I got there.
He's trying to kill me!
And then Vance went out the door.
All I knew is I just wanted to get my hands on him. I opened the door to the van, and I took the back of his head and I started smashing it. By this time, 6 neighbors are on the sidewalk. Everybody's calling 911. I felt like I was defending my family for their lives.
Within minutes, police were on the scene. Fearing repercussions, neither Scott nor Vance pressed charges against each other. Once Scott gave his statement, he took off,
He's trying to kill me!
leaving Deborah to take action.
Best thing you can do at this point is get a restraining order.
I wanted to press charges. I had told him what he did, But they were saying basically it was a he said, she said.
Just don't have you on our witnesses. It's crime.
So it would be better if I got a restraining order and have him served, because the restraining order would make him leave the house.
But there were more immediate concerns.
I knew something was seriously wrong with the baby.
Deborah's sister rushed her to the nearest hospital.
When I got to the hospital, they said I dilated 2 centimeters. And they gave me 3 choices: either be prepared for him to be mentally retarded, have an abortion, or I can keep him and take a chance and hope for the best. I knew in my heart of hearts that I needed to take that chance.
Deborah was released from the hospital and immediately filed a restraining order against Scott. But when she returned home, Scott was waiting.
What are you doing here? You have to leave.
He decided to leave. I was scared to death. I didn't know where he was going, and I didn't care where he was going.
Then on September 24th, Deborah finally went into labor and delivered a healthy baby boy, Brandon.
He had all his limbs, his feet, his hands, his toes. I was so happy.
Once back on her feet, Deborah promptly filed for divorce, and Scott didn't fight it.
The marriage was done. It was over. And I got sole custody of Brandon. But I always had that fear in the back of my mind, with Scott showing up.
And for 4 years, Deborah didn't hear a word from or about Scott. Life was finally starting to feel normal again, when in the fall of 1993, she got an unexpected call from a detective in San Diego, California.
They told me that Scott was in jail. He was arrested for rape. I was in such disbelief.
Just a few days earlier in San Diego, Scott picked up a woman at a bus stop near his home.
Scott invited her up. He then held her captive for about 4 hours, sadistically raping her.
She was able to talk him into letting her go. And of course, she went and she reported to the authorities.
By March 3rd, 1994, Scott Erskine was found guilty of 10 charges, including rape, and pled guilty to possession of a deadly weapon.
I knew he was a lot of things. He was capable, like I said, the look in that eye.
Scott Erskine was sentenced to 70 years in prison, and as all prisoners in California, was forced to give a sample of his blood for DNA purposes.
I was relieved that I didn't have to worry about him anymore. I felt safe at that point.
But little did Deborah know, this was just the tip of the iceberg. Scott was more evil than she could have ever imagined. The years passed, and by the summer of 2002, Deborah was happily raising her 15-year-old daughter and her son Brandon, now 12.
My childhood was amazing because I had everything I needed. There was no reason to ask about my father. And everything about my father was a secret.
But secrets have a way of coming out, and the whole horrible truth about Brandon's father was about to be exposed.
I got a phone call from a detective saying that they needed to come and talk to me right away about Scott. And I'm thinking, oh my God, Scott escaped.
Scott Erskine?
As soon as I heard Scott Erskine, that caught my attention immediately. I knew my dad's name.
So, of course, I agreed for him to come there.
I need you to finish your homework in your bedroom.
I sent the kids in the back room because I didn't want Brandon to be involved in that conversation.
I wanted to listen because I knew she was talking or referring to my father.
And when the detective arrived, Deborah sat in stunned silence as he unleashed a story of undeniable horror.
There's evil inside of him.
I just broke down in tears, just immediately.
I was like in shock. What he did was just unspeakable.
In the summer of 2002, Deborah Erskine sat in dismay as a detective from San Diego told her a horrific story about her ex-husband, Scott.
He started to explain why he was there. They were investigating a cold case concerning 2 boys that were murdered in San Diego.
Scott Erskine, my beautiful.
March 29th, 1993, we got a call to report to bodies of 2 young boys found. There was evidence that they were tortured. There was evidence of molestation. And they were strangled.
Forensics were able to find cigarette butts, which they were able to extract DNA from. But back in '93, DNA testing was much more complicated and you needed more of the sample. They didn't have a lot of sample, so they waited.
Several years later, with advances in DNA, investigators decided to retest the sample.
We got a hit with an individual by the name of Scott Erskine.
DNA from Scott's 1993 San Diego rape case matched the DNA left at the scene of the 2 murdered boys. And if that wasn't enough, authorities suspected Scott was responsible for another murder in West Palm Beach during the summer of 1989.
There was a woman whose body had been found. She was raped and murdered. They also found a cigarette butt at the scene. They were able to get a DNA sample from that, and it matched Erskine's sample.
When the detective told me the dates that this person was murdered in West Palm Beach, I knew it happened right at the time that he choked me.
I'll kill you!
The first thought that went through my mind was, that could have been me. It's so surreal. I didn't think it could really happen to me. Never in a million years would I think that I was married to a serial killer.
And just when things seemed they couldn't get any worse, Deborah's son Brandon appeared from behind the corner.
I walked out into the living room and I told her, I was like, I heard everything. I just broke down in tears, just immediately.
This is what my father did, and what does that make me?
I just started crying my eyes out and just hugging him.
As the San Diego prosecutor prepared his case against Scott, more details of his violent history came to light. In 1980, when Scott was just 17 years old, he attacked a 14-year-old boy.
Erskine had done a job as a youth counselor when he saw this boy and attacked him, beat him severely, sexually molested him.
Unbelievably, Scott served only 4 years before he was released in 1984. Just 4 years before moving to Florida and meeting Deborah.
I was in shock. All I can do is reflect back to when I did the background check. And nothing came up. And I kept thinking, why did nothing come up?
When Deborah met Scott, his previous crime had been committed in California and was not reported to Florida authorities.
You have California and Florida. And back in those days, you know, there was not that connection.
In September 2003, Scott Erskine went to trial in San Diego for the murders of the 2 boys. He was found guilty and sentenced to death in June 2004. 2 months later, Scott pled guilty to the murder of the woman in West Palm Beach and received a life sentence.
He's gonna have to answer for what he's done. He's gonna definitely have to answer to God on this one.
What he did is just unspeakable. Somebody like that doesn't deserve to be living.
Today, Deborah remains grateful she escaped Scott's monstrous clutches.
I really believe my family saved us. Had my family not been there, I believe I would be dead, and my son would be dead.
With her daughter now on her own, Deborah continues to focus on Brandon.
It took a long time, but Brandon's doing good. And he's left the thought of his father.
I literally stopped thinking of him. So that way it's not painful when he is dead. Because I don't want to know when he's dead. Just let it happen.
This is a new journey for the two of us. And I'm very excited for that new journey to start.
In the fall of 1980, 19-year-old Rob Wedby was focused on his career as he attended college in Knoxville, Tennessee.
Well, I was actually studying to be in the insurance business. I worked in the family-owned business. It seemed like a good place to start for me.
But when he and a friend cruised the campus strip one night, insurance was the last thing on Rob's mind.
My buddy and I were looking for dates. We pulled up to a red light, and there was a couple of girls that pulled up next to us, and they were trying to get our attention. So we pulled over, and the girl in the passenger seat, I heard her say, "I get to drive her." I thought she was a cute girl.
The young blonde introduced herself as 17-year-old Lisa Outlaw. As the two chatted, Rob found himself impressed by more than Lisa's good looks.
She was sports-oriented. We talked about football and boxing. I liked that. It gave us something in common to talk about.
Let me give you my number.
She wrote her number down, asked me to call her. I was glad that she did it.
I'd love to see you guys sometime. Call me.
1 week later, Rob invited Lisa on a picnic lunch and soon realized Lisa's surname matched her slightly rebellious streak.
Lisa's family was of modest means. Seemed like there was a little bit of tension there.
I got away to Memphis. I hitchhiked.
She really wanted to get out of her home.
As the pair began dating exclusively over the next year, Rob did his best to keep Lisa distracted from her home life.
Lisa enjoyed material things, and he was happy to be able to give her these gifts and see the look on her face when she got it. It meant a lot to him.
But by the fall of 1981, Lisa started dropping not-so-subtle hints that she was ready to take the next step.
Lisa wanted to get married, and I wanted to live together for a while first. But she said she wouldn't do that. If I wanted to do that, we had to get married.
Rob was torn, but he wouldn't have to waffle on a decision for long.
So I get a call from her one day, and her tone is rather upset. She said, "I'm pregnant."
I don't know what to do.
It scared the hell out of me, to be real honest about it.
Pregnant? Really?
It was quite a shock. I thought, well, we're going to get married and raise this child together. Lisa was extremely excited. She was walking on water.
But just 2 months into wedding planning, Lisa casually dropped a devastating bombshell.
Lisa said, "So I've been meaning to tell you I'm not pregnant. I found out the other day."
What? I made a mistake.
Probably could have knocked me over with a feather. And it was no big deal to her. It was very confusing. But I didn't want to go back on my word.
I'm sorry.
So on a warm summer day, Rob married Lisa at his family church as planned.
I felt like I was going to pass out. I wanted to run out of there.
Rob was getting more and more nervous, but I remember saying it's going to be just fine.
It was kind of stressful that day, but it turned out nice. They were the perfect couple.
3 years later, life only got better for the couple when they discovered Lisa was pregnant again and successfully delivered a healthy baby boy.
Everybody was just bouncing off the walls, ecstatic.
They seemed to be the picture-perfect, storybook-ending happy family.
But this young family's perfect world would take a devastating turn when Rob's beautiful bride did the unimaginable.
She was like a black widow.
Lisa would do anything to get what she wanted.
I never thought she was capable of anything close to that. I didn't even recognize her.
In the summer of 1989, Rob Wedby and his wife Lisa were happily raising their son Justin when they learned they were expecting again, this time with a little girl.
Lisa was happy. She was pretty excited, pretty giddy. Everyone was on cloud 9.
But 9 months later, when Lisa delivered baby Brittany, smiles of joy were suddenly replaced with concerned whispers.
The doctor said, I have some bad news for you.
Unfortunately, the news is not good.
Brittany has Down syndrome. I don't wish that news on my worst enemy.
I was at the office and the clerk said, Rob's on the phone, for you. He said, well, we were just told that we have a Downs baby. It was just devastating.
But Rob's feelings were quickly overshadowed by Lisa's reaction.
Lisa came unglued. Just absolutely went berserk.
It's your fault.
It shocked me. She was a level of upset that I don't recall ever seeing.
As expected, the first few months with Brittany at home were not easy.
Lisa had led a perfect life, and Brittany's birth changed all that. I don't think she was mentally nor emotionally prepared to handle that.
Soon, Lisa began spending more time at their local church.
Lisa got more and more active in the choir and stayed long after choir practice was over. So I took over a lot of the responsibilities for feeding and taking care of Brittany.
Still, Rob was surprised when he started hearing ugly rumors that Lisa was having an affair with the church organist, Michael Frazier.
I confronted Lisa about it, and she said,
I could do a lot better than Michael Frazier.
I thought about it for a minute, and I thought, yeah. So I let it go.
But by April 1994, after 12 years together, it was obvious to Rob that his marriage was in serious trouble.
Lisa brought up the subject of divorce. She said, I made an appointment with the attorney. I was coming to the realization that, well, maybe this is where we're going, even if I don't want to. So I said, hey, I'll just meet you there then. But when I walked in, you would have thought I was Clint Eastwood with a 44 Magnum out.
I'll be right back.
The attorney came out, and she said, I'm going to call 911.
You need to leave now.
So I left, thinking, what in the world?
Later that night, Rob asked Lisa about the odd response.
She said, well, they have a lot of trouble with mad spouses, and that's all I know.
And a month later, as Lisa was still considering divorce, Rob was even more confused by another puzzling incident.
Up the street comes 2 police cars. They pull in my driveway, and they get out, get their hands on their guns. I'm thinking, whoa. And he said, we got a call about a domestic abuse case at 7600. I said, no, this is 7500. You got the wrong house.
When Lisa arrived home moments later, Rob was even more baffled by her reaction.
She just blew it off. She said, well, I guess they had the wrong address. Simple as that.
Don't worry.
So it was very confusing. But by that point, I'm just like, what's next?
Rob didn't have to wait long. A few weeks later, Lisa did an about-face that changed everything.
She said, I've been thinking about it, and maybe we should have at least one more run at it for the sake of the kids. And I was happy to hear that because that's what I wanted to do.
But on June 8th, while Justin was staying with Rob's parents and Brittany was asleep, Rob awoke to a strange feeling.
I was in that sort of la-la land, you know, where you're not sure, is this a dream, is this real? And then I could see the silhouette of an arm, a hand, and a knife in it. I knew, at that point, obviously it's not a dream.
In fact, Rob had just woken up to a real-life nightmare.
I just cannot imagine the level of terror that he must have felt.
There was blood everywhere, and I was screaming for Lisa. I realized that he's not going to let me leave this room alive.
On June 8th, 1994, after reconciling with his wife Lisa, Rob Wedby awoke to his worst nightmare.
Somebody was trying to kill me. I thought it was an intruder, a murderer. He was trying to stab me in the neck. But he missed, and he cut my earlobe pretty much off. That was an oh my God moment.
As blood ran down his neck, Rob struggled for control of the knife.
I got a hold of his wrists and rolled him into the floor and got around behind him. I started calling for Lisa. No answer. The first thing I thought is maybe he has actually killed her first. And then I started worrying about Brittany. So all kinds of things are going through my head.
Just then, the knife-wielding intruder broke free.
I grabbed for his left wrist and I got the knife blade. Cut the base of my thumb down to the artery. That hurt like a son of a gun. It was bleeding profusely. I was getting tired, and I was losing my grip on his wrist because of the blood. I felt like the longer I stayed in that room, the less my chances of survival would be.
Suddenly, Rob looked up and saw what seemed like a vision.
Lisa showed up in the doorway of the bedroom with a baseball bat. My first thought was, all right, she's here to help me. So I'm hollering at Lisa. I said, turn the light on and call the cops. I got him.
Lisa, hit him with the bat.
She stands there. Just stands there. Doesn't react. Then all of a sudden, he chimes in.
Lisa, do it now.
And in an instant, I recognized his voice.
Do it now, Lisa.
I said, I know who this is. This is Michael Frazier. There was a moment where everything came clear, and I knew they were in cahoots.
Lisa! Lisa!
I realized that I had to do something. I'm sweating, my mind's racing, my heart's pounding. So I just stood up with him, raised him over my head as high as I could lift him, and then threw him into the corner. And then I took off. Snatched the bat away from Lisa as I passed her.
Desperate, Rob ran to his neighbor's house and called the police. When investigators arrived, they found Brittany safe in her bed, with no sign of Michael or Lisa. But Rob was astounded by what police would uncover.
Everyone was in shock.
You don't see a case like this every day.
It was just so diabolical. I was completely blown away.
On the morning of June 8, 1994, Rob Wedby stood shaken and bleeding as police searched for his wife Lisa and his attacker, Michael Frazier.
The first officer questioned me, and I told him that Michael Frazier had attacked me in my bed with a knife, and my wife was involved in it. I sustained a severed earlobe and a severed artery and tendon in my thumb.
While Rob was treated for his injuries, police located Lisa at a neighbor's house.
Lisa told us a stranger broke into the home in the middle of the night and attacked the sleeping couple, but we couldn't substantiate any injuries she'd suffered. She was very emotionless about it. Lisa had all the signs of deception.
After several hours of interrogation, Lisa finally cracked.
I let Michael in.
Lisa admitted to knowing Frazier and letting Frazier into the house at around 8 o'clock. Lisa hid him in the downstairs closet, and she waited on the couch for Frazier to come out and kill her husband.
Lisa Wedby was arrested and charged with attempted first-degree murder and conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. Meanwhile, police located Michael Frazier at his home and arrested him with the same charges.
When they hauled her off to jail and they hauled him off to jail, I was in shock. I never thought she was capable of anything close to that.
As Rob's injuries healed, he began to look back at the strange events over the past several months.
Everything came clear as to what was going on. Lisa was having an affair with Michael.
Lisa filed to get a protective order on the grounds that Rob was abusing her.
That explained the crazy incident. When I went up to the attorney's office, I think she had told them that, I had threatened her.
Then there was the mysterious domestic abuse call that sent police to Rob's home.
Lisa had convinced Michael that she was a victim of domestic violence.
I think Michael Frazier made the fraudulent 911 call to set me up. Problem is, Lisa hadn't gotten home before he made the call, and he told police the wrong address.
Since their plans were failing every step of the way, the adulterous schemers turned to murder.
If Rob Whitby had been killed, Lisa would stand to inherit the house, the property, all the money from any insurance policies, above $1 million. She would have gained not only her freedom, but financial freedom.
I was disgusted. It is hard to believe that, someone that you've been married to, had children with, could actually be that cold.
In September 1995, Michael Frazier was convicted of attempting to commit voluntary manslaughter. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison.
I was very disappointed in the verdict. I believe he committed attempted first-degree murder because there was premeditation.
I think he was manipulated by this woman. She apparently was able to convince him that she was in danger, and Rob Whitby had to be killed for her to be safe. But he stood to come away with quite a bit of money and a beautiful companion.
On June 24, 1996, Lisa Wedby pled guilty to solicitation for murder to avoid a potential 25-year prison sentence. Unbelievably, she received only 1 year in jail, followed by 3 years of probation.
In my opinion, to do the things that Lisa was contemplating, she got it. No sentence. She did virtually no time.
I was very disappointed. I regret the fact that I was not aggressive enough and that I didn't press harder to take that to trial.
After 13 years of marriage, Rob filed for divorce and received full custody of Justin and Brittany.
I guess I'm grateful after all that at least the children are safe. Lisa never asked about the kids. She never mentioned them. Let's just say there's a special place in hell for people like that.
Today, Rob continues to work at the family insurance company and remains a devoted father to his 2 children.
It's hard to be a single parent, but my folks did kick in and we became part of a team, I guess.
Rob is truly an inspiration. He has remained strong for his family throughout this whole ordeal.
Since her release in 1997, Lisa has never reached out to Brittany or Justin.
I'll never really understand it. I don't know if a person can really put something this devastating totally behind them, but you don't have to let that, define your life.
The year is 1992. London is a city caught between two worlds, the fading echoes of the industrial age and the neon-soaked dawn of the digital era. But beneath the flickering streetlights of the East End, something ancient and predatory is moving. The air is thick with the scent of rain, diesel, and a fear that hasn't been felt since the days of the Ripper. It begins in the early hours of a Tuesday in November, a night like any other, until the silence of Wapping High Street is shattered by a discovery that would haunt the Metropolitan Police for 3 decades. A woman young, vibrant, her life extinguished in a display of calculated brutality that defies logic. No struggle, no witnesses, no DNA, just a chilling surgical precision that suggests the killer didn't just murder her. He performed a ritual. The headlines the next morning are a scream across every newsstand. The missed killer strikes. But the public doesn't know the half of it. They don't know about the signature left behind. A small, silver Victorian coin placed under the victim's tongue. A tribute? A taunt? The investigators are staring at a ghost. Lead Detective Miller walks the perimeter of the yellow tape, the flashbulbs of the forensic teams illuminating the crimson stain on the cobblestones. He feels it in his bones. This isn't a one-off. This is a beginning. The city's heartbeat falters. People start locking their doors twice. They stop looking strangers in the eye on the tube. Because in 1992, the shadows in London are getting longer, and someone is hiding inside them, watching, waiting for the fog to roll in again. This isn't just a murder. It's a crack in the soul of the city. As the weeks turn into months, the pressure mounts. The Home Office demands results. But the evidence is a vacuum. The killer is a phantom who understands the limitations of 20th century forensics. He knows about blood types, he knows about fingerprints, and he knows how to disappear into the gray London drizzle. Every lead is a dead end. Every suspect has an alibi. The file on the Wapping murder grows thicker, but the answers remain buried under a mountain of paperwork and unanswered questions. Then it happens again. 6 months later, under the iron ribs of the Blackfriars Bridge. Another victim. Another silver coin. The pattern is cemented. A serial killer is operating in the heart of the capital, and the police are powerless. The media circus turns into a frenzy. The term cold case isn't in the common lexicon yet. Back then it was just a failure. A failure that would stretch across the millennium, through the turn of the century, and into a future where technology finally catches up with the monsters of the past. But for now, in the cold damp of 1992, the trail is going ice cold. The killer walks among the crowds, a face in the fog, carrying the secret of his crimes like a dark treasure. Decades pass. The World Trade Center falls. The internet changes the face of human connection. The London Olympics come and go. And through it all, Detective Miller, now retired, his hair white and his heart weary, still keeps a folder in his desk. The missed killer folder. He remembers the faces of the families. He remembers the smell of the Thames that night. He knows the killer is out there, growing old, perhaps thinking he got away with it. Perhaps thinking that time has washed the blood from his hands. But time is a fickle thing. Time allows for the evolution of the unseen. It allows for the birth of genetic genealogy, for the mapping of the human soul through a single strand of hair. Fast forward to the present, 2026. A young lab technician in a sterile facility in Lambeth is running a routine check on a degraded sample from 1992. It's a long shot. A fishing expedition, they call it. But then the computer pings. A match. Not to the killer, but to a distant cousin in a sleepy village in Yorkshire. The thread is pulled. The sweater begins to unravel. The 34-year-old wall of silence is about to crumble. The hunt is no longer about boots on the ground. It's about the code in our cells. The missed killer isn't a ghost anymore. He has a name. He has an address. And he has nowhere left to hide. Imagine the shock in that quiet London suburb when the tactical units descend. The neighbors see a frail 70-year-old man being led out in handcuffs. He looks like a grandfather. He looks like the man who tends to his roses and complains about the weather. But as the cameras flash for a split second, the mask slips. The eyes are the same eyes that stared through the fog in 1992. The cold case isn't cold anymore. It's white-hot. The headlines of 1992 are resurrected. But this time the ending is different. This is the story of how a shadow was finally stepped on. How 3 decades of hiding ended in a sterile interrogation room. The interrogation begins. The air in the room is heavy, reminiscent of the humidity before a storm. The suspect sits motionless. He doesn't ask for a lawyer. He doesn't protest his innocence. He simply stares at the silver coin placed on the table by the new generation of detectives, the same coin found in Wapping 34 years ago. It's a psychological chess match. The detectives use the recordings of the original crime scenes, the grainy VHS tapes of the 90s, played on high-definition screens. The contrast is jarring. The past is bleeding into the present. They talk about the first victim. They say her name. For 34 years she was a statistic, a tragedy, a case file. Now she is a person again. The killer flinches. It's the smallest of movements, a twitch in the eyelid, but to the trained eyes of the profilers, it's a confession. He begins to speak. His voice is a dry rasp, like dead leaves on pavement. He talks about the urge. He talks about the fog. He describes the layout of London in 1992 as if it were yesterday, the shortcuts that no longer exist, the pubs that have been turned into luxury flats, the darkness that has since been chased away by LED streetlights. He tells them how he watched the investigation from the sidelines. He attended the public vigils. He even stood behind Detective Miller at a press conference, invisible in plain sight. The audacity of his survival is sickening. He moved to the suburbs, changed his life, became a pillar of the community. He thought the world had forgotten. He thought the law had a shelf life. But justice in the age of 2026 is an apex predator. It doesn't tire. It doesn't forget. It just waits for the science to catch up with the sin. As the confession unfolds, the details get darker. There weren't just 2 victims. There were others, unidentified, missing persons, names that had slipped through the cracks of a less connected era. The scope of his depravity is staggering. He is a relic of a more violent time. A monster that survived into an era that has no place for him. The community is in shock. People who shared tea with him, who let him watch their children, are reeling. The betrayal of his normalcy is the true horror. How many missed killers are sitting in our parks right now, waiting for their DNA to catch up with them? The file is finally closed. The closed stamp hits the paper with a finality that echoes through the halls of Scotland Yard. For Miller, now watching the news from his armchair, the weight finally lifts. The ghosts of 1992 can finally rest. But the shadows of London remain. The case serves as a warning. The past is never truly dead. It's just waiting for the light to be turned on. The mist killer thought he was part of the fog, but even the thickest mist eventually clears when the sun rises. 34 years. 12,410 days of freedom bought with the blood of the innocent. It ends not with a bang, but with a click of handcuffs and a sequence of genetic markers. The London 1992 cold case is no longer a mystery. It's a testament to the fact that no matter how deep you bury the truth, the earth eventually gives it up. The silver coin has lost its luster. The killer has lost his mask. And the city of London, for the first time in 3 decades, breathes a collective sigh of relief. The monster is in a cage, and the fog has finally lifted. The interrogation room is a vacuum, a pressurized chamber where the weight of 34 years of silence is finally imploding. This isn't just about a man in a chair. It's about the evolution of the hunt. In 1992, we were fighting a war with blunt instruments. We had blood typing that could only narrow a suspect pool to 10% of the population. We had grainy CCTV that turned human faces into shivering clusters of gray pixels. We had paper files stored in damp basements where the truth literally rotted away. But the man sitting across from the detectives, this grandfatherly figure with the trembling hands, forgot one crucial thing. The human body is a ledger that never stops recording. He left a trail in 1992 that he thought was invisible. a microscopic signature that he believed the rain had washed into the Thames. He was wrong. The rain didn't wash it away. It preserved it in the silt, waiting for a future that could read the language of the dead. The breakthrough didn't come from a tip-off. It didn't come from a witness coming forward after a crisis of conscience. It came from a single degraded skin cell recovered from the underside of a silver coin, the killer's macabre calling card. For decades, that sample was useless, a tantalizing maybe locked in a cryovault. But by 2026, the science of forensic genetic genealogy had transformed from a niche tool into a celestial map. Investigators no longer needed the killer's DNA to be in a criminal database. They just needed his third cousin to take an ancestry test to find out if they were 5% Scandinavian. That's the terrifying beauty of the modern age. Your family tree is a trap, and your relatives are the bait. The moment a distant relation uploaded their saliva sample to a public database, the missed killer's fate was sealed. The algorithms began to stitch together the branches, narrowing the forest down to a single tree, then a single limb, then a single man. As the detectives lean in, the light from the overhead LEDs reflects in the suspect's eyes. Eyes that have spent 3 decades watching the world change while he remained frozen in his own private darkness. They begin to lay out the digital ghost profile. This wasn't just DNA. It was a behavioral reconstruction powered by 2026 AI modeling. They fed every detail of the 1992 scenes into a neural network. The angle of the blade, the placement of the coin, the timing of the tides, the weather patterns of that specific November night. The AI didn't just find a suspect, it built a monster. It predicted his height, his gait, his likely profession. It told the detectives that the killer didn't just know the East End. He belonged to it. He was someone who moved through the docks with the confidence of a ghost. Someone who understood how the fog muffled sound and how the river swallowed secrets. The suspect, Arthur Vance, watches the screen as a 3D digital recreation of the whopping crime scene rotates in high definition. He sees the alleyway as it was, before the gentrification, before the luxury flats, back when it was a place of rust and shadow. He sees the virtual autopsy of his first victim, the wounds highlighted in neon blue, showing a surgical precision that suggests he had more than just a passing knowledge of anatomy. He was a butcher's apprentice in the late 80s. A detail the police missed in the chaos of 1992. The detectives press him. They don't shout, they whisper. They use the read technique, evolved for the digital age, a relentless psychological erosion. They tell him about the silver coins. Why the coins? Why the Victorian currency? Vance's breathing hitches. He looks at the image of the coin on the table. It's a 1.5-ounce silver crown from 1892. Exactly a century before his first kill. The narrative shifts from the lab to the mind. The profilers had called him a disorganized specialist, a rare breed. He was messy in his emotions but clinical in his execution. He didn't kill for sex. He killed for a sense of historical continuity. In his twisted mind, he was a successor to the Victorian predators, a man out of time trying to reclaim a London that was being paved over by modernity. Every murder was a tribute to a city that was dying. The silver coins weren't just trophies, they were Karen's obol, the toll paid to the ferryman to cross the River Styx. He was sending his victims into the afterlife with the currency of a dead era. The chilling realization hits the room. He wasn't just a serial killer. He was a self-appointed gatekeeper of the underworld. But the most shocking revelation comes not from the DNA, but from the digital breadcrumbs Vance left in the years following the murders. In the early 2000s, as the internet became a playground for the anonymous, Vance couldn't help himself. He frequented cold case forums under the username Fogwalker92. He didn't just lurk, he guided. He would theorize about the missed killer's motives, correcting users who got the details wrong, subtly mocking the police's incompetence. He was hiding in plain sight, feeding on the digital attention, a vampire of information. The 2026 Cyber Task Force tracked those IP addresses back through 2 decades of archived data, navigating through defunct providers and dead servers, until they found the physical line that connected Fogwalker92 to Arthur Vance's quiet suburban home in Essex. The tension in the interrogation room reaches a breaking point. The lead detective, a woman whose father had been one of the original constables on the 1992 perimeter, slides a photograph across the table. It's not a crime scene photo. It's a photo of Vance at a neighborhood Christmas party in 2015. He's holding a glass of mulled wine, smiling at the camera. He looks kind. He looks safe. "How do you do it, Arthur?" she asks, her voice cutting through the hum of the air conditioning. "How do you wake up every morning, look at your wife, look at your grandkids and not see the blood on the coins?" Vance finally looks up. For the first time, the grandfather mask doesn't just slip, it shatters. A cold, predatory grin spreads across his face. A look that belongs in a 19th century asylum. "The blood doesn't stay on the coins," he rasps, his voice a chilling echo of a London that no longer exists. "The silver cleanses it. I wasn't taking lives. I was preserving them. Look at her." He points to the digital reconstruction of the first victim. "She's famous now. Because of me, she's eternal. Without me, she would have been a nobody, forgotten in a week. I gave her the coin. I paid her way." The room goes ice cold. This isn't remorse. It's a terrifying justification. A peek into a psyche that has spent 34 years marinating in its own darkness. He starts describing the night of the second murder under Blackfriars Bridge. He describes the sound of the trains overhead, the way the vibration felt in his teeth, the way the victim looked at him, not with fear, he claims, but with a sudden understanding. The detectives realize they aren't just dealing with a killer. They're dealing with a fanatic. He begins to list names that aren't in the official file. These are the shadow victims, the ones the police never found, the ones who were labeled as runaways or suicides. He tells them where they are buried, deep in the marshlands of the Thames estuary, in places where the tide never fully recedes. The 2026 drone units are already being dispatched, equipped with ground-penetrating radar and thermal sensors. As the suspect speaks, the map of London is being redrawn with the locations of his hidden graveyard. The cold case is expanding, transforming from a double homicide into one of the most prolific killing sprees in British history. The scale of the horror is unprecedented. The news begins to leak. Outside the station, the 24-hour news drones are already hovering, their blinking lights like predatory stars. The public, who have forgotten the name Mist Killer, is suddenly plunged back into the nightmare. But this time there is a face. There is a name. There is a monster they can finally point at. The interrogation continues into the night, a marathon of depravity where every hour brings a new location, a new victim, a new silver coin. Vance isn't just confessing, he's bragging. He knows his time is over, and he wants to ensure his legacy is as dark as possible. He wants to be the ghost that London never forgets. As the sun begins to rise over the Shard and the modern skyline of London, the final piece of the puzzle falls into place. They find the trunk. Hidden in a storage unit rented under a false name since 1995, it contains the archives. Bundles of newspaper clippings, locks of hair, and a velvet pouch containing 22 more silver Victorian crowns. 22. The number is a physical blow to the investigators. They thought they were looking for a man who killed twice. They found a man who had been hunting for a decade before he ever stepped into that alley in Wapping. The case of 1992 wasn't the beginning. It was the peak of a career built on silence and silver. The sun rises over the Thames estuary, but its light doesn't feel warm. It's a pale, clinical glare that reveals a landscape of gray mud and skeletal salt marshes. A place where the river doesn't just meet the sea, but where it swallows the land. This is the killing field Arthur Vance whispered about in the dead of night. As part 3 of this investigation unfolds, the scale of the horror shifts from the psychological to the physical. Specialized recovery teams, clad in white forensic suits that contrast sharply against the black muck, move with the slow, rhythmic precision of mimes. They are guided by drone-mounted LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar, technology that can see through feet of sediment to find the shapes the Earth has tried to hide. It is a grim harvest. One by one, the shadow victims are found. They aren't just skeletons, they are time capsules of tragedy, preserved by the anaerobic mud of the marshes, still clutching the secrets of the decades they were stolen from. The scene is a nightmare of logistics and emotion. Each discovery is marked by a blue forensic tint that pops up like a bruise on the horizon. The silence of the marsh is broken only by the hum of the recovery drones and the distant, mournful cry of gulls. Back in the city, the atmosphere is electric with a different kind of tension. The news has broken. The number 22 hangs over London like a shroud. This isn't just a cold case closed. It is a national trauma reopened. The families of the missing, those who spent 30 years wondering if their daughters, sisters, or mothers simply walked away from their lives, are now converging on a secure facility in North London. They are there for the confrontation they never thought would come. They are there to look into the eyes of the man who turned their lives into a permanent state of grief. Arthur Vance is moved from the interrogation room to a high-security courtroom for a preliminary hearing, but the hearing is a mere formality for the spectacle that follows. The police have arranged a controlled identification briefing for the families. It is a room divided by reinforced glass. On one side, the broken survivors of 3 decades of silence. On the other, the man who calls himself a gatekeeper. When Vance is let in, he doesn't look like a monster. He looks like a withered leaf, fragile and gray. But as his eyes sweep across the faces in the room, there is no flicker of shame. There is only a terrifying, predatory recognition. He knows their names. He knows their faces. He remembers the specific toll he took from each of them. The confrontation is visceral. A mother, now in her 80s, her hands shaking as she holds a faded photograph of a girl in a 1980s school uniform, presses her palm against the glass. She doesn't scream. She whispers a single word. Why? Vance leans in, his breath fogging the glass, and his reply is loud enough for the microphones to catch. Because she was perfect for the collection. The room erupts. The sound of human grief, raw, jagged, and uncontrollable, fills the air. This is the moment the missed killer myth dies and the reality of a serial predator takes its place. He didn't kill for a cause. He didn't kill for a ritual. He killed because he enjoyed the ownership of another human being's end. He enjoyed being the only person in the world who knew where they were. As the recovery teams in the marshes continue their work, the forensic analysis of the archives found in the storage unit begins to yield even more chilling data. It wasn't just hair and coins. Vance kept journals. Not digital files, but handwritten ledgers in cramped, obsessive script. He documented the weather, the tides, the vibe of the city on the nights he hunted. He was a student of his own depravity. The journals reveal a man who felt more alive in the presence of death than in the company of the living. He describes the 1992 Wapping murder as his masterpiece, the moment he felt he had truly captured the essence of the old London fog. He writes about the silver crown as if it were a religious relic, a holy object that sanctified his crimes. But the 2026 investigation is finding cracks in his masterpiece. Digital forensics experts are cross-referencing his journals with satellite imagery archives and historical weather data. They find a discrepancy. A murder he claimed to have committed in 1994 doesn't match the tidal patterns he recorded. The investigators realize Vance is over-reporting. He is claiming victims that aren't his, trying to inflate his legend, even as he rots in a cell. It's a final desperate play for relevance. He wants to be the most prolific killer in history, even if he has to lie to achieve it. The hunt becomes a battle for the truth, sorting the real victims from the fantasies of a dying ego. The DNA evidence from the marshes starts coming back. The first 3 bodies are identified. The names are announced in a somber televised bulletin. For the first time in 34 years, there are funerals. There are flowers. There is a sense of a cycle finally closing. But for the detectives, the work is far from over. They are tracing Vance's movements during his missing years, the gaps in his journals where he claimed to be resting. They find travel records. He didn't just stay in London. He moved through the coastal towns of Kent and Essex. The fear shifts. How many other marshes are there? How many other rivers hold his silver coins? The psychological profile of Vance evolves again. He is identified as a nostalgic predator, a man who kills to preserve a version of the world that he feels is being lost. In his mind, every new skyscraper in London, every new technology, was an insult to the purity of the past. He saw his victims as preserved beauties, frozen in time by his hand, protected from the decay of aging and the pollution of the modern world. It is a logic so warped, so profoundly narcissistic, that it leaves the veteran profilers shaken. He didn't hate his victims. He claimed to save them. This realization adds a layer of sickening irony to the case. The man who hated the future was finally caught by the very future he tried to ignore. As Part 3 draws to a close, the focus returns to the river. The Thames is a character in this story, the silent accomplice that hid Vance's work for over 3 decades. But the river is giving up its dead. The Mist Killer is no longer a ghost of the East End. He is a prisoner of the present. The investigation is moving into its most complex phase, the legal battle of the century. How do you prosecute a man for 22 murders when the evidence spans 34 years of changing technology? How do you ensure that the shadow victims get their justice when their killer is already at the end of his life? The clock is ticking. Vance is old, and the justice system is racing against his mortality. He wants to take his secrets to the grave, but the 2026 forensic machine is stripping him bare, one skin cell, one silver coin, one marsh grave at a time. The fog hasn't just lifted, it has been burned away. The heavy iron-bound doors of the evidence locker swing open with a groan that echoes the weight of the secrets held within. We are moving into the heart of the darkness now, the black books. These aren't just journals. They are the architectural blueprints of a nightmare. Found hidden behind a false wall in Arthur Vance's suburban garage, these 14 volumes, bound in cracked leather and stained by decades of nicotine and river water, represent the most significant breakthrough since the DNA match. As the forensic linguists and cold case detectives peel back the pages, they realize they aren't just reading a confession. They are reading a correspondence. And it is here, in the cramped, frantic ink of the mid-90s, that the investigation takes a terrifying turn. The Mist Killer may have pulled the trigger or wielded the blade, but he wasn't acting in a vacuum. Throughout the pages, a recurring name appears, written in a different, more elegant hand: the Alchemist. The realization sends a shockwave through the task force. For 34 years, the world believed in a lone wolf, a singular phantom haunting the London fog. But the journals suggest a much more organized, much more sinister reality. This wasn't just a series of murders, it was an exchange. The journals reveal that Vance was being tutored. The Alchemist provided the silver coins. The Alchemist selected the locations. The Alchemist taught Vance how to disappear. As the 2026 AI scanners digitize the handwriting, they find something chilling. The ink used by the Alchemist in a 1995 entry contains traces of a specific chemical compound used in high-end restorative art, the kind used by elite morticians or museum curators. The hunter had a handler. The anatomy of the shadow partner. The search for the Alchemist begins with a deep dive into the London of 1992 to 1998. The task force utilizes digital time travel, a process of aggregating every scrap of available data from the era. They pull archived tax records, membership lists of obscure occult societies, and the staff manifests of every funeral home and museum within a 10-mile radius of the Thames. The signature. The silver Victorian coins weren't just random finds. They were proof quality, coins that would have been part of high-end numismatic collections. The connection. In 1993, a major heist at a private estate in Chelsea saw the theft of a rare collection of Victorian crowns. The police at the time treated it as a simple burglary. Now they see it as the arming of a killer. The location. The journals mention a sanctuary near the Isle of Dogs. In the 90s, this was a wasteland of derelict warehouses. Today, it's a forest of glass skyscrapers. The investigation narrows down to a specific individual, a man who disappeared from the public record in 1999, shortly after the murders suddenly stopped. His name was Julian Vane, a disgraced historian with a specialty in Victorian death rituals. The parallels are too perfect to be a coincidence. But Vane is a ghost. There is no death certificate, no pension records, no digital footprint. He is the original off-grid predator. While Vance was the muscle, the man who enjoyed the wet work in the fog, the Alchemist was the architect, the one who turned a serial killer's impulses into a twisted work of performance art. Tracking the invisible. 1990s surveillance meets 2026 logic. The tension ramps up as the team tracks a lead to an old, forgotten basement in the Limehouse district. Using thermal imaging and acoustic sensors that can detect hollow spaces behind brickwork, they find what Vance called the lab. It is a time capsule of 1992. On the table, rusted scalpels, more silver coins, and most hauntingly, a Polaroid camera. The alchemist didn't just want the bodies buried. He wanted the moment captured. The team finds a hidden compartment containing hundreds of photographs. These aren't the photos of the victims we know. These are practice sessions. The scope of the Mist Killer saga is ballooning. We are no longer looking at 22 victims. We are looking at an entire underground network of violence that operated beneath the feet of millions of Londoners for a decade. The narrative shifts to the psychological interrogation of Arthur Vance regarding his partner. When confronted with the name The Alchemist, Vance doesn't smile. He doesn't brag. He shrinks. The arrogance we saw in the previous hours vanishes, replaced by a genuine bone-deep terror. "You don't find him," Vance whispers, his eyes darting to the corners of the ceiling as if the alchemist is watching through the very cameras recording the session. "He finds you. He's not a man. He's the fog itself. He told me the silver would keep them quiet. He told me he'd take care of the rest. This isn't a partner. It's a master." The power dynamic is clear. Vance was the weapon, but the alchemist was the hand that swung it. But the most disturbing revelation comes from a 2026 data scraping algorithm. While monitoring dark web auction sites for rare Victorian coins, the cyber unit finds a listing. It's a 1892 silver crown, identical to the ones used in the murders. The listing was posted 48 hours after Vance's arrest. The description reads, "A final toll for the ferryman. The collection is complete, but the fog never truly clears." The realization hits the room like a physical blow. The alchemist isn't dead. He isn't in hiding. He's active. He's watching the news. He's watching this investigation. The arrest of Arthur Vance wasn't the end of the story. It was the alchemist's final act of curation. He allowed Vance to be caught. He left the DNA. He led the police to the marshes. Why? Because the masterpiece needed an ending, and a serial killer rotting in a 2026 prison cell is the perfect final chapter for a man obsessed with the history of crime. The ghost in the machine. The hunt intensifies. The task force transitions from a cold case unit to an active manhunt team. They realize that the alchemist's historian persona wasn't just a hobby, it was his camouflage. They begin looking for men in their late 70s or early 80s who have maintained a presence in the academic or archival world. They find a trail of consultancies for various European museums, always paid in cash or through complex shell companies. The alchemist didn't just hide in the shadows, he hid in the light of high society. He was the man you called when you needed to authenticate a Victorian artifact. He was the man who sat in the back of the British Library, unnoticed, surrounded by the very history he was bloodily reenacting. As the rain lashes against the windows of the Lambeth headquarters, the lead detective stares at the map of the London Underground. She notices something: the locations of the murders, the disposal sites in the marshes, and the alchemist's suspected residences form a perfect geometric pattern, the shape of the Ouroboros, the snake eating its own tail. A Victorian symbol for eternity. The murders weren't just killings. They were points on a map intended to seal the city in a ritual of blood. The alchemist was trying to turn London itself into a monument to his madness. The red herring. A sudden tip leads the SWAT team to a cottage in the Cotswolds. It's a trap. The house is rigged with incendiary devices. As the team moves in, the structure erupts in a thermite fire so hot it melts the very evidence they were seeking. The message. Inside the mailbox of the burning house, they find a single, scorched envelope. Inside is no letter. Just a lock of hair from a victim whose body hasn't been found yet. And a small silver coin. This time it's not a Victorian crown. It's a 2026 commemorative coin. The threat. The alchemist is evolving. He's no longer obsessed with the past. He's coming for the present. The community is in a state of high alert. The Mist Killer headline is replaced by a new, more terrifying one. The alchemist, the mastermind still at large. The sense of closure that the families felt at the end of Part 3 is shattered. The horror has mutated. We aren't just looking for a 70-year-old man in the suburbs. We are looking for a genius-level intellect who has had 30 years to prepare for this moment. He knows our technology. He knows our algorithms. He's been playing a game of chess with the Metropolitan Police since 1992. And he's just sacrificed his knight, Arthur Vance, to put the entire city in check. The episode ends with a chilling shot of the Thames at night. The modern lights of the Canary Wharf skyline reflect on the water, but the camera tilts down, deep into the black current, where the silt hides the silver. The narrator's voice drops to a near whisper. We thought the DNA gave us the answer. We thought the science of 2026 had conquered the shadows of 1992. But as we dig deeper into the black books, we realize the truth is much worse. Arthur Vance was just the ghost. The alchemist is the one who owns the night. And he's not done with London yet. The screen fades to black, leaving only the sound of the river lapping against the shore and the faint, rhythmic ticking of a Victorian pocket watch. The hunt for the alchemist has begun, and the stakes have never been higher. The cold case isn't just closed, it's been blown wide open, revealing a conspiracy of blood that stretches from the Victorian era to the very second you are listening to this. The manhunt for the alchemist is no longer a localized investigation. It is a digital wildfire spreading across the borders of Europe, a high-stakes dragnet that pits the most advanced surveillance technology of 2026 against a man who has mastered the art of being invisible. While Arthur Vance rots in a high-security cell in Belmarsh, his silence echoing like a hollow tomb, the task force in Lambeth is working against a clock that feels like a rhythmic hammer. The burning cottage in the Cotswolds wasn't just a diversion, it was a declaration of war. The alchemist, Julian Vane, didn't just burn the evidence. He incinerated the idea that this was a case limited to the past. He is no longer a memory from 1992. He is a living, breathing threat in the present day, and he has just claimed his first modern victim. The discovery is made in the early hours of a rain-slick Thursday morning, not in a dark alleyway or a muddy marsh, but in the sterile high-security environment of the British Museum. A senior curator, a man who had dedicated his life to the study of Victorian London, is found in the center of the Enlightenment Gallery. There is no sign of a break-in. No alarms were tripped. The biometric scanners show no unauthorized entry. Yet, there he is, slumped against a glass display case that once held a collection of rare 19th-century currency. The scene is a terrifying mirror of the Wapping murder of 1992. The surgical precision, the lack of a struggle, and there, resting on the curator's tongue, is a brand new 2026 minted silver coin. The alchemist isn't just killing anymore. He is updating his ritual. He is telling the world that the mist has returned, and this time, it is powered by the very technology meant to dissipate it. The irony is a jagged blade. Julian Vane, the disgraced historian, has used his knowledge of the museum's internal protocols he likely helped draft decades ago, to bypass every modern safeguard. The lead investigators, standing beneath the towering marble columns of the gallery, realize they are dealing with a ghost who knows the machine better than the operators do. They pull the digital thread, the aggregated data of every smart device, every wearable, and every networked camera in the Bloomsbury area. In 2026, the city is supposed to be a panopticon, a place where no one can move unseen. But Vane is a master of the dead zone. He knows the blind spots of the LiDAR arrays. He knows how to exploit the lag in the facial recognition algorithms by using subtle, projected light patterns that scramble the software's ability to map a human face. He is moving through London as a glitch in the system. The forensic analysis of the new victim reveals a chilling detail. The curator wasn't chosen at random. He was the man responsible for the digitization of the cold case archives, for the museum's historical crime exhibit. He had been looking into the 1992 files. He had been looking for Julian Vane. The alchemist didn't kill him for a ritual. He killed him for his curiosity. It was a professional assassination disguised as a poetic murder. This realization shifts the energy of the room. The detectives aren't just looking for a serial killer. They are looking for a highly intellectual insurgent who is systematically eliminating anyone who might recognize his true identity. The hunter is now hunting the historians. The search for Vane's biometric footprint leads the team to the Eurostar terminal at St. Pancras. A partial hit on a low-resolution security feed from 48 hours prior shows a man who fits Vane's age and stature. He is wearing a tailored coat, carrying a leather briefcase, and moving with the poise of a diplomat. He doesn't look like a man who spent 30 years hiding in the shadows. He looks like a man who owns the world. He boards the 9:24 a.m. train to Paris. The investigation goes international. Interpol issues a red notice. The French Brigade Criminelle is mobilized. The hunt moves from the fog of the Thames to the catacombs and boulevards of the Seine. But Vane is always one step ahead. He isn't just traveling. He is retracing the steps of the Victorian elite, moving through the grand tour of death that obsessed the scholars of the 19th century. In Paris, the team finds a lead in a small, privately owned library in the Marais district. The librarian remembers a man, elegant, soft-spoken, with an encyclopedic knowledge of medieval alchemy, who spent 3 days studying the Ars Goetia and the maps of the Paris sewers. He left behind a calling card, a silver Victorian crown, placed inside a book about the history of the Black Plague. The message is clear. Vane sees himself as a plague, a force of nature that cannot be contained by modern medicine or modern law. He is playing with the investigators, leading them through a historical scavenger hunt, while he prepares for his next transformation. Back in London, the cyber unit makes a breakthrough. They manage to decrypt a portion of the Black Books that was previously thought to be random gibberish. It's not gibberish. It's a coordinate system based on the London Stone, the ancient heart of the city. When the coordinates are mapped onto a 3D model of 2026 London, a pattern emerges. The murders are forming a sigil, a magical symbol used in ancient occultism to bind an area. The alchemist isn't just killing for the sake of it. He is performing a citywide ritual that requires a specific number of sacrifices at specific points in the urban geometry. Wapping was the first point. Blackfriars was the second. The British Museum was the third. There are 2 points left. 2 more sacrifices needed to complete the circle. 2 more lives before the alchemist believes he can transcend the physical world. The tension in the Lambeth headquarters reaches a fever pitch. The detectives are no longer just investigators. They are participants in a high-stakes game of occult chess. They use the AI to predict the next 2 locations. The algorithms point to 2 iconic London landmarks, the Tower of London and the Palace of Westminster. The scale of the threat is now existential. If Vane succeeds, he won't just be a serial killer. He will be the man who brought the heart of British democracy to its knees. The security around these sites is tightened to an unprecedented level. The Ring of Steel is resurrected. But this time, it's a digital ring, drones, sensors, and elite tactical units standing ready to intercept a man who might not even be using the front door. But Julian Vane has one more card to play. While the police are focused on the landmarks, he strikes where they aren't looking. He targets the bloodline. The 2026 investigation discovered Vane's family tree, but it also uncovered a secret. Vane has a daughter, a woman in her 30s living a quiet, anonymous life as a nurse in East London. She has no idea who her father is. She knows him only as a phantom who disappeared before she was born. Vane's 4th point isn't a location, it's a person. He believes that to complete his ritual, he must sacrifice his own legacy to the river. The episode shifts to a pulse-pounding sequence as the tactical units realize the diversion. They race toward the nurse's flat in Hackney, their sirens screaming through the rain-drenched streets. We see the nurse, Sarah, closing her curtains, unaware that the shadow in the corner of her room isn't a trick of the light. It's the alchemist. He stands there, not with a knife but with a silver coin. He looks at her with a terrifying blend of paternal love and cold, calculated detachment. "It's time to go back to the river, Sarah," he whispers. "The circle must be closed." The police burst through the door, but the room is empty. The window is open, the curtains fluttering in the cold wind. On the bedside table, a single silver coin spins slower and slower, until it falls flat with a dull metallic ring. The date on the coin is 2026. The alchemist has taken her. The hunt is no longer about cold cases or historical justice. It is a desperate race to save a life before the mist claims its most precious sacrifice. The 34-year-old story of the Mist Killer has evolved into a modern tragedy of biblical proportions. The final shot of Part 5 is a drone's eye view of the Thames estuary at midnight. The water is black, churning with the tide. In the distance, we see the faint glow of a flare. Not a distress signal but a beacon. The alchemist is calling the police to the final stage. He wants them to watch. He wants them to see the completion of his work. The voiceover drops to a chilling bass. The past isn't just behind us. It's underneath us. And tonight, the river is hungry. The screen cuts to black, the sound of the rising tide filling the silence, leaving the audience breathless, caught in the grip of a mystery that has spanned 3 decades and is now reaching its terrifying blood-soaked climax. The sirens of the Thames Division are a jagged wail against the rhythmic thrum of the 2026 London night, but for the first time in this investigation, the technology feels too slow. This is part 6, the betrayal of the disciple. While the alchemist vanishes into the marshlands with Sarah, the focus shifts back to the sterile cage of Belmarsh Prison. Arthur Vance, the man the world thought was the monster, is beginning to realize he was never the protagonist of this story. He was the disposable ink in someone else's pen. As the news of the Hackney abduction flashes on the silent monitor outside his cell, Vance's composure doesn't just crack, it vaporizes. The missed killer is gone. In his place sits a terrified, broken old man who has just realized that the eternal legacy he was promised was a lie. He isn't a gatekeeper. He's a loose end. The lead detective enters the cell. No files. No photos. Just a tablet showing the live feed of the search in the estuary. She doesn't need to speak. The betrayal is written in the data. "He didn't take her to save the bloodline, Arthur," she says, her voice cold as the river. "He took her to erase yours." The psychological collapse is instantaneous. Vance begins to scream, not in anger but in a frantic, desperate need to be heard. He starts spilling the unwritten chapters of the Black Books. He reveals the alchemist's ultimate sanctuary, a decommissioned Victorian pumping station buried beneath the mud of the Isle of Dogs, a cathedral of iron and brick that doesn't exist on any modern map. It is a ghost station, a relic of the Great Stink of 1858, forgotten by the city but kept alive by the man who worships its decay. The scene shifts to the river. A high-speed pursuit in the 2026 digital age doesn't look like a movie chase. It's a silent, predatory dance of drones and stealth craft. The Metropolitan Police's aquatic interceptors, hydrofoil drones equipped with multispectral sensors, skim the surface of the Thames at 80 knots. They are hunting a signature, the Silver Trace. The alchemist, in his arrogance, has been using an antique steam launch, a vessel that shouldn't be able to move through the water without being detected. But he has modified it with 21st-century baffling technology. He is a hybrid of eras, a man who uses the 1890s to hide from the 2020s. The anatomy of the betrayal. As the interceptors close in, the alchemist's logic begins to unravel. Vance's confession reveals the true nature of their partnership. The lie, Vane told Vance that the silver coins were a way to anchor the souls of the victims to the city. The truth, the coins were a tracking mechanism, not for the police but for the alchemist. Every coin was a beacon. In an early prototype triangulation system Vane had been developing since the 90s. He wasn't preserving victims. He was mapping the city's veins for a large-scale catastrophic event. The endgame. The alchemist never intended for Vance to survive. The DNA left at the 1992 scenes? It wasn't an accident. Vane had planted Vance's biological markers with surgical precision, ensuring that when the technology finally caught up, it would only find the servant, never the master. The pursuit enters the kill zone, the narrow, treacherous bends of the river near the O2 Arena. The alchemist's steam launch, the Proserpina, is finally spotted. It looks like a funeral barge draped in black silk, cutting through the water with an eerie, silent grace. On the deck, Julian Vane stands at the helm, a figure of terrifying composure. Sarah is tied to the mast, a living silver coin placed around her neck like a millstone. He isn't fleeing. He's leading them. He is drawing the police toward the ghost station, the final point of his sigil. The ghost station, a cathedral of filth. The interceptors converge, but the Proserpina disappears. It doesn't sink, it vanishes into a hidden siphon, a maw in the river wall that opens only at a specific tidal height. The tactical teams board the station from above, rappelling into a darkness that hasn't seen light in a century. Their helmet cams capture a sight that defies modern forensic science. The pumping station has been converted into a gallery of the fog. Thousands of silver coins are embedded in the brickwork, reflecting the blue light of the police lasers like a distorted starry sky. This is where the shadow victims were processed. This is the heart of the 34-year nightmare. The air is thick with the smell of ozone and ancient mud. The detectives find the alchemist in the central chamber, standing before a massive rusted turbine. He has Sarah positioned over the intake. He isn't holding a weapon. He's holding a remote. "You think you've caught me," Vane says, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the brick vault. "But you've only arrived for the inauguration. 1992 wasn't a year of murders. It was the year of the first pour. Today we finished the casting." He explains that the silver coins weren't just trophies. They were components of a massive city-wide circuit. By triggering the station's ancient mechanisms, he intends to release a chemical compound into the Thames that will react with the silver beacons he's planted for decades, creating a toxic luminous fog that will paralyze the city. The tension is unbearable. The tactical team has a clear shot, but the remote is a dead man's switch. If Vane's heart stops, the station activates and Sarah falls. It's a stalemate designed over 3 decades. But then a voice cracks over the comms. It's not the commander. It's Arthur Vance, patched in from his cell in Belmarsh. "Julian," Vance whispers, his voice trembling with a lifetime of subservience turned to hate. "The coins. The 2026 ones. They aren't silver, Julian. They're a zinc alloy. The chemistry is wrong. The future cheated you." Vane freezes. For the first time, the alchemist looks uncertain. He looks at the 2026 coin around Sarah's neck. The forensic teams had realized the flaw in his plan hours ago. While Vane was obsessed with the purity of the past, he failed to account for the impurities of modern manufacturing. His great work is built on a lie of metallurgy. The distraction is all the lead detective needs. She fires, not at Vane, but at the turbine's rusted drive chain. The iron snaps with a sound like a cannon blast. The mechanism jams. Sarah is pulled back from the edge just as the tactical team swarms the platform. The alchemist doesn't fight. He doesn't scream. He simply looks at his hands, as if he can see the failure of his logic written in his skin. "Zinc," he mutters, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "How very common." He is tackled to the ground, the silver coins in the walls reflecting the red and blue strobes of the police. The 34-year hunt is over. The Mist Killer and the Alchemist are both in chains. But as Vane is led away, he leans toward the lead detective and whispers a final chilling riddle. "You found the gallery. But did you find the vault? There are more than 22, detective. Check the foundations of the Shard. Check the roots of the New London. I didn't just kill people. I built this city on them." The final shot of Part 6 shows the ghost station being sealed by forensic teams. The silver coins are being pried from the walls one by one, but the camera pans out, moving through the brickwork, into the deep foundations of the modern city. We see a flicker of silver, deep in the concrete of a skyscraper's base. Then another. Then hundreds more. The alchemist's work isn't finished. It's structural. The cold case is closed. But the city itself is a crime scene that may never be fully cleaned. The courtroom is a cathedral of glass and steel, a 2026 marvel of legal transparency that feels more like a surgical theater than a hall of justice. This is Part 7, the trial of the century. For the first time in 34 years, the two architects of London's darkest era are in the same room, but they are no longer partners. They are predators circling each other in a cage of evidence. On one side, Arthur Vance, shrunken gray, his eyes leaking the desperation of a man who realized too late he was a puppet. On the other, Julian Vane, the alchemist, still regal, still wearing his intellect like a suit of armor, looking at the court with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a failed experiment. The air is thick with the scent of ozone and the heavy silence of a city holding its breath. Every seat is filled with the survivors, the families who have waited 12,410 days for this confrontation. The prosecution opens with a digital bombardment. They don't just show photos, they project a 3D time-lapse of terror. Using the data recovered from the ghost station and the vault of the Shard, they map the victims' final moments onto the very geography of the courtroom. The jury is wearing haptic-augmented glasses, allowing them to see the silver coins as they were placed, not as artifacts, but as anchors of a ritual. The lead prosecutor, her voice steady but sharp as a scalpel, turns to the alchemist. "You didn't just kill Mr. Vane. You curated. You treated human lives as components in a structural occultism that you believe makes you the owner of this city. Vane doesn't flinch. He simply adjusts his glasses and smiles, a cold, thin line that sends a shudder through the gallery. Then the betrayal of the disciple enters its most visceral phase. Arthur Vance is called to the stand. The room goes ice cold. Vance refuses to look at the alchemist. He speaks in a voice that sounds like grinding stone, detailing the nights in 1992, the smell of the rain, the weight of the silver, the way Vane would stand in the shadows and give the signal. He told me we were making history, Vance rasps. He told me the world was forgetting its soul, and we were the ones pinning it down. I was the hand, but he was the mind. He chose them. He chose the girls because their birthdays matched the dates on the coins. It was all a numbers game to him. The revelation causes an audible gasp. The mist killer wasn't just a monster of impulse. He was a worker following a meticulously researched schedule of astronomical and historical alignments. The cross-examination is a bloodbath. Julian Vane's defense team, some of the most expensive legal minds in Europe, don't try to prove his innocence. Instead, they attack the validity of the digital ghost profile. They claim the 2026 AI models are biased, that they hallucinated a mastermind because the police couldn't accept a lone wolf. They point at Vance and call him a delusional sycophant, trying to offload his guilt onto a distinguished, albeit eccentric, historian. But then the prosecution plays their trump card: the vault of the Shard records. When the Shard was being built in the late 2000s, Vane was a historical consultant for the foundation digging. The 2026 deep ground sensors didn't just find silver. They found a time capsule buried beneath the central pylon. Inside was a ledger written in Vane's blood, detailing every murder from 1982 to 2026, including murders the police hadn't even discovered yet. The courtroom becomes a site of psychological warfare. Vane finally speaks. His voice is a rich, cultured baritone that fills the hall, commanding attention like a dark professor. You speak of crimes as if they are static events, he says, looking directly at the judge. I speak of monuments. London is a city built on the bones of the forgotten. I simply ensured those bones were placed with intention. I didn't take their lives, I gave them a function. They are the foundation of your skyline. Without my work, this city is just glass and air. I gave it weight. The arrogance is breathtaking. It is the manifesto of a man who has completely transcended human morality. He isn't defending his actions, he is defending his art. The structural horror. The city as a crime scene. The trial takes a turn into the truly macabre as the foundation mapping results are released to the public. The Vault of the Shard wasn't just a storage space. It was a hub for a network of silver-lined conduits that run through the city's newest infrastructure. The scale. It's not just 22 victims. The ledger suggests a number closer to 50. The method. Vane used his influence as a consultant to hide remains in the pore of the concrete foundations of major landmarks across the city. The reality. Every time a Londoner walks past the Gherkin, or stands beneath the shadow of the walkie-talkie building, they are, according to Vane's logic, participating in his ritual. He has turned the entire population of London into unwitting witnesses to his life's work. The emotional peak of the trial comes when Sarah, the alchemist's daughter and intended final sacrifice, takes the stand. The silence is absolute. She looks at the man she never knew, the man who tried to end her life to complete a cycle. She doesn't cry. She looks him in the eye and says, "You're not a builder, Julian. You're just a coward who was afraid of being forgotten. You didn't make this city. We did. We, the people who actually live in it, not the ones you buried under it." For the first time, the alchemist's mask slips. A flicker of genuine rage, or perhaps for a man like him, the closest thing to shame, crosses his face. The philosopher king is being judged by a component, and he cannot handle the loss of control. As the day ends, the jury is sequestered, but the city outside is in turmoil. The Mist Killer saga has morphed into a crisis of faith in the city's very structure. People are avoiding the landmarks mentioned in the trial. There is talk of unbuilding, of excavating the foundations of the Shard to recover the lost souls. The cost would be billions. The alchemist has achieved his goal. He has made himself inseparable from the city of London. Even in a 2026 prison cell, he owns a piece of the skyline. The cold case is closed in the eyes of the law, but the psychological scarring of the Capitol is just beginning. The episode closes with a shot of Arthur Vance being led back to his cell. He looks up at the moon through the high barred window. He knows he will never see the Thames again. But in the cell next to him, through the thick soundproofed walls, he can hear a faint rhythmic tapping. A metallic sound, like a silver coin being struck against stone. The alchemist is still working. He is still counting. The trial is almost over, but the great work of Julian Vane is a ghost that London may never be able to exorcise. The verdict arrives not with a thunderclap, but with the heavy, suffocating finality of a tomb door closing. This is part 8, the verdict and the deep excavation. The jury, after 3 days of deliberation, 3 days of staring into the digital abyss of Julian Vane's monuments, returns to the glass courtroom. The air conditioning hums, a sterile vibration against the raw nerves of the victims' families. When the foreperson stands, the silence is so profound you can hear the flickering of the holographic displays. The words guilty ring out 22 times for Arthur Vance. But for Julian Vane the alchemist the word guilty is repeated 56 times. 56 counts of murder, spanning 4 decades. The scale is historic. The sentence is absolute. Life without the possibility of parole, to be served in the high-security psychiatric wing of Belmarsh, under 24-hour digital surveillance. But as the judge prepares to pass the final sentence, Arthur Vance, the broken disciple, requests to speak. This is the moment that will change the history of London's architecture forever. Vance doesn't look at the judge. He looks at the cameras, his eyes wide with a frantic, terminal clarity. "You think you found them all because you followed the silver," he rasps, his voice cracking. "But the silver was just the wiring. You haven't seen the power source." He reveals that the vault of the Shard was only a relay station. The true heart of the alchemist's ritual, the place where the first circle was drawn in 1982, isn't under a skyscraper. It's under the very bedrock of the Thames barrier. The revelation sends the Metropolitan Police into a state of emergency. If Vane has compromised the structural integrity of the Thames barrier, the city's primary defense against the rising North Sea, the Mist Killer saga moves from a criminal case to a threat of national security. While the court is cleared, a specialized team of subterranean forensic engineers is dispatched. They aren't just looking for bodies anymore. They are looking for structural sabotage. They descend into the maintenance shafts of the barrier, 5 stories beneath the riverbed. The environment is a claustrophobic nightmare of dripping salt water and rusted iron. Using 2026 quantum gravimeters, the engineers detect a series of voids within the primary concrete piers of the barrier. These aren't natural cracks. They are deliberate chambers carved out during the final stages of the barrier's construction in the early 80s, a time when Julian Vane worked as a junior site surveyor. As the drills pierce the concrete, the sensors don't find blood. They find a high-density, pressurized mercury-silver alloy. Vane didn't just bury bodies. He turned the city's flood defenses into a giant liquid circuit. He has created a dead man's trigger, on a geographical scale. If the barrier is ever activated during a major storm surge, the pressure will rupture these chambers, releasing a toxic plume into the heart of the city's water supply. Back in the cell block, the alchemist watches the news on a small wall-mounted monitor. He isn't crying. He is smiling. He has achieved the ultimate goal of the high-level predator. He has made his own death irrelevant. Even if he dies in prison, his work remains embedded in the vital organs of the city. He has achieved a form of dark immortality. "The city is my body now," he whispers to the camera in his cell, knowing the detectives are watching. "Every time the tide rises, I breathe. Every time the barrier closes, I clench my fist. You haven't closed the case. You've just moved into my house." The deep excavation begins. It is the most expensive and dangerous forensic operation in human history. To remove the alchemist circuit from the Thames barrier and the foundations of the Shard, the city must essentially be dismantled from the bottom up. The 2026 London skyline, once a symbol of progress, is now viewed as a giant crime scene. The cost is projected to be in the trillions. The political fallout is instantaneous. The government that oversaw the construction of these landmarks faces collapse. The Mist Killer has done more than murder 56 people. He has murdered the city's trust in its own foundations. As the first of the barrier victims, a young woman missing since 1983, is finally recovered from the concrete. The reality of the alchemist's cruelty becomes undeniable. She wasn't just buried, she was integrated. Her remains were encased in a silver-lined sarcophagus that served as a conductor for the mercury. It is a level of depravity that exceeds any serial killer in the annals of history. He didn't just take their lives, he took their very atoms and turned them into a machine of malice. The families are devastated anew. This isn't a funeral, it's a reclamation. The episode reaches its peak as we see the contrast between the two men. Arthur Vance, having given his final confession, is found dead in his cell the following morning. He took his own life with a sharpened piece of a 2026 commemorative coin, the very alloy he claimed had cheated the alchemist. It is a final poetic act of defiance or perhaps a final submission to the ritual. But the alchemist remains. He sits in his cell, perfectly still, his eyes fixed on the London skyline visible through the reinforced glass of the psychiatric ward. He is waiting. He knows the big one. The once-in-a-century storm surge is coming. And he knows that when it does, the city will have to choose between drowning or activating his masterpiece. The final shot of Part 8 is a slow zoom into the alchemist's eye. In the reflection of his pupil, we see the blinking red lights of the cranes atop the shard, where the excavation teams are working through the night. The voiceover is a low, vibrating growl. We thought the DNA was the key. We thought the trial was the end. But as the tide begins to turn against the barrier, we realize that Julian Vane didn't just hide in the fog. He became the fog. And the fog is rising. The screen cuts to a live weather report showing a massive storm system forming in the Atlantic, heading straight for the English Channel. The clock is ticking. The cold case has become a race against nature itself. The sky over London in the winter of 2026 is no longer gray. It is a bruised, apocalyptic purple. This is Part 9, the Mercury Tide. The storm of the century, a meteorological monster named Killian, is screaming across the Atlantic with a central pressure that has the Thames estuary command on a knife edge. The 34-year-old cold case has officially mutated into a race against a citywide assassination. At the center of the storm is the Thames barrier, the city's iron gates. But beneath those gates, the alchemist's liquid circuit is a ticking bomb of silver and mercury. If the barrier is raised to save London from the surging North Sea, the pressure will ignite the circuit. If it stays down, the city drowns. Julian Vane has placed the Metropolitan Police in a demonic dilemma. Perish by water or perish by poison. In the high-security bunker of the Lambeth Command Center, the lead detectives and structural engineers are operating in a state of controlled panic. The deep excavation teams at the barrier are working in a race against the tide, their thermal drills biting into the ancient concrete piers. They aren't just looking for bodies now. They are looking for the heart of the circuit, the primary mercury reservoir vein installed in 1982. The 2026 sensors detect a rhythmic vibration coming from the bedrock. It's not the tide. It's a pump. A mechanical heart that Vane hidden 40 years ago, powered by the very kinetic energy of the river's flow. The Mist Killer didn't just use the fog as a cover. He used the river as a battery. The tension shifts to the psychiatric wing of Belmarsh. Julian Vane is no longer sitting still. He is standing at the window, his fingers drumming a complex, mathematical rhythm against the glass. He isn't watching the rain. He is feeling the pressure changes in his inner ear. He is tuning himself to the storm. When the lead investigator storms into his cell, her boots echoing on the sterile floor, Vane doesn't even turn around. "Can you hear it, detective?" he asks, his voice vibrating with a terrifying youthful energy. The river is singing. It's the sound of a city finally realizing it's a guest in its own home. You have 2 hours before the surge hits the estuary. 2 hours to decide if you'd rather be a lung full of water or a lung full of silver. The command center makes a desperate call, Operation Albedo. They deploy a fleet of subaquatic nanobots, the cutting edge of 2026 environmental tech, into the barrier's maintenance pipes. These microscopic machines are designed to seek out the mercury-silver alloy and neutralize it by binding it into a solid inert foam. It is a digital immune system attacking a chemical virus. The live feed from the nanobots is projected onto the command wall. A chaotic, swirling world of rusted iron and dark water. They find the reservoir. It is a massive silver-lined sphere, pulsing with the rhythmic intake of the river. But as the nanobots move to engage, they hit a wall. Vane didn't just use chemistry. He used haptic encryption. The reservoir is shielded by a frequency that scrambles the nanobot sensors. He expected the future. He built a cage for it. The anatomy of the surge London's 0 hour. As the storm hits the coast, the digital dragnet picks up a final, horrifying detail from the alchemist's decrypted journals. The circuit isn't just a poison delivery system. It is a resonance weapon. The frequency, Vane calculated that the vibration of the barrier's massive gates, when under the stress of a 10-meter surge, would hit a specific frequency, the frequency of the fog. The effect. This frequency would turn the mercury silver mist into an aerosol that doesn't just settle. It hangs. It would create a permanent, toxic cloud over the East End, a literal London fog that would never lift, turning the cradle of his crimes into a permanent ghost town. The target, the shard, the gherkin, and the barrier form the 3 points of a tuning fork. He isn't just killing people. He is trying to play the city like a lethal instrument. The atmosphere in the city is one of pure terror. The evacuation of the Thames flood zones is a logistical nightmare of sirens and strobe lights. Millions of people are moving inland, their faces illuminated by the frantic orange glow of emergency flares. Above them, the mist killer headlines have been replaced by a single word on every digital billboard: run. But for the recovery teams at the barrier, there is no running. They are 5 stories down, the water pressure groaning against the bulkheads. They have found the first of the final 3. The victims Vane used as the literal keys to the circuit. These victims weren't just encased in concrete. They were wired into the mechanical triggers of the gates. To save the city, the engineers have to do the unthinkable. They have to dismantle the victims' resting places while the gates are under maximum load. The climax of Part 9 arrives as the first wave of the surge hits the barrier. The massive steel crescents begin to rise, their hydraulics screaming against the weight of the North Sea. In Belmarsh, Vane begins to hum. It is a low guttural sound that matches the vibration of the rising gates miles away. Now, he whispers. The first pour becomes the final breath. The sensors at the barrier detect a massive pressure spike in the mercury reservoir. The liquid circuit is priming. A silver luminescence begins to leak from the base of the piers, turning the churning brown water into a terrifying, glowing neon. The poison is beginning to bleed into the Thames. But the lead detective has one final move. A gamble that relies on the only thing Vane couldn't calculate: human error. She orders the manual override of the barrier's middle gates. By deliberately misaligning the gates, she changes the frequency of the vibration. It is a move that risks the structural failure of the entire barrier, but it's the only way to break the alchemist's tuning. The ground shakes. The sound is like 1,000 bells ringing at once, a discordant, bone-rattling cacophony that echoes from Wapping to Westminster. In his cell, Vane stops humming. His face contorts in pain. The symphony is out of tune. The mercury-silver alloy, deprived of its resonance, begins to crystallize, turning from a lethal mist into a harmless, heavy sludge that sinks to the riverbed. The city is saved from the poison, but the surge is still coming. The misaligned gates are buckling. The ghost station discovered in Part 6 begins to flood, the silver coins being swept away by the sheer force of the tide. The alchemist's masterpiece is being physically torn apart by the very river he tried to command. As the water level stabilizes just inches below the top of the embankments, a silence falls over London, a silence broken only by the sound of the rain. The 34-year-old ritual has been broken by a tactical act of chaos. Julian Vane collapses in his cell, his connection to the city severed. The mist has finally been grounded. The episode ends with a shot of the Thames barrier as the storm begins to recede. The silver glow in the water is gone, replaced by the flickering blue lights of the recovery teams. They are finally pulling the first circle victims from the mud, the names that started it all in 1982. The voiceover is a weary, hollow rasp. We broke the circuit. We stopped the song. But as the sun rises over the bruised remains of the East End, we realize that some things cannot be unbuilt. The alchemist is in a cell, but the silver is still in the soil. And the river never forgets a debt. The screen fades to a final image of a single silver Victorian coin, washed up on the mudflats near Wapping, half buried in the silt, waiting for the next tide. The storm has passed, leaving behind a city that is physically intact but spiritually hollowed out. This is part 10. The Reckoning of the Silver. The apocalypse Julian Vane choreographed was averted by a desperate act of mechanical dissonance, but the fallout is a different kind of disaster. The Mercury tide has receded, leaving the Thames barrier scarred and the foundations of London's great landmarks under a permanent state of forensic siege. As the morning light of a cold, clear January 2026 breaks over the Shard, the city awakens to a reality where its very skyline is a graveyard. The 34-year-old cold case isn't just closed. It has been surgically opened, revealing a cancer of secrets that no court can fully heal. In the high-security psychiatric ward of Belmarsh, the atmosphere has shifted from clinical observation to a funeral vigil. Julian Vane, the alchemist, the man who claimed to be the architect of London's soul, is no longer a predator. He is a ghost inhabiting a dying frame. The failure of the resonance weapon didn't just break his plan, it shattered his psyche. He sits in a wheelchair now, his eyes fixed on a point 3 inches in front of his face, his hands, once so precise in their surgical and historical craft, shaking with a relentless palsy. He has stopped eating. He has stopped speaking. But the Metropolitan Police aren't finished with him. There is one final vault that hasn't been opened. The location of the Apostle coins. The 12 original silver crowns that Vane claimed held the biometric keys to every murder he ever committed. The final interrogation is not a battle of wits. It's a search for a legacy. The lead detective, the woman who risked the city's safety to break Vane's circuit, enters the room. She doesn't bring evidence bags or DNA charts. She brings a small wooden box. Inside is the 1892 silver crown found under the tongue of the first victim in Wapping. She places it on the table. The metallic clink echoes like a gunshot in the silent room. For the first time in days, Vane's eyes focus. He looks at the coin and a single tear, thick and slow, carves a path through the dust on his cheek. "It was never about the killing, was it, Julian?" she whispers. "It was about the fear of being irrelevant. You didn't want to save London. You wanted to own its nightmares." Vane's voice, when it finally comes, is a dry rasp, the sound of a century of secrets being ground into powder. "You think you won," he breathes. "But you only proved my point. To save the city, you had to break it. You had to misalign the gates. You had to introduce chaos into the order. You didn't beat the alchemist. You became the alchemist's greatest experiment." He begins to reveal the final truth. The 56 victims weren't just chosen for their birthdays or their birthdays' alignment with the stars. They were chosen because they were the unseen, the people the city had already forgotten before he ever touched them. He argues that he didn't make them victims. He made them permanent. By burying them in the foundations of the Shard and the barrier, he gave them the only stability they would ever know. The depravity of his logic is the final blow to the investigation. The team realizes that Vane doesn't want forgiveness. He wants a monument. And the city, by conducting the deep excavation, is giving it to him. Every time they pull a body from the concrete, every time they document a shadow victim, they are adding another page to his legend. The Apostle coins are revealed to be hidden not in a vault, but in the most public place imaginable, the time ball atop the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. The very device used to set the world's time was the clock, for his ritual. It is a terrifying realization. The alchemist had synchronized his crimes with the heart of global time itself. The National Memorial, a city of ghosts. While the interrogation reaches its end, the government announces the National Memorial of the Silver Circuit. It is a day of mourning unlike any other. For 24 hours, the lights of the Shard, the Gherkin, and the London Eye are turned off. The city is plunged into a darkness reminiscent of the 1992 fog. At the Thames barrier, a permanent beacon is lit. Not a silver light, but a warm amber glow intended to demystify the water. The victims' names. For the first time, all 56 names are read aloud at St. Paul's Cathedral. Many are names that haven't been spoken in 40 years. The restitution. The Apostle coins are recovered from Greenwich, and in a symbolic act of closure, are melted down in a public furnace. The silver is then used to create 56 small, modest plaques, placed at ground level across the city, wherever a victim was found. The structural decision: the vault of the shard is not excavated. The risk to the building's integrity is too great. In a controversial move, the government decides that the remaining remains will stay where they are, but the area is declared a consecrated site. The building itself becomes a vertical cemetery. The narrative shifts to the final moments of the case. Arthur Vance's family, the survivors of the man who was both a murderer and a puppet, are granted a private meeting with Sarah, the alchemist's daughter. It is a moment of profound, quiet tragedy. Two legacies of blood meeting in a sterile room, trying to figure out how to live in a world that knows their names for all the wrong reasons. Sarah, having looked into the heart of the mist, decides to leave London. The city doesn't feel like a home anymore, she tells the press. It feels like a ledger. I can't walk down a street without wondering whose bones are keeping the pavement level. As the memorial service at St. Paul's concludes, the camera pans over the crowd. We see the faces of the detectives, the engineers, the families, and the ordinary Londoners who have lived through the year of the reckoning. There is a sense of exhaustion, a collective weight that may take generations to lift. The mist killer is no longer a ghost. He is a convicted criminal, a dying man in a bed. But the mystery of why a city as grand as London could allow a shadow to grow so large for 34 years, remains unanswered. The 2026 technology found the bodies, it broke the circuit, and it caught the men, but it couldn't explain the malice. The final scene takes place back in Belmarsh. The monitors show Julian Vane's vitals dropping. He is fading with the sunset. The lead detective stands at the window of the observation room, watching the flatline begin to form on the screen. There is no triumph in her eyes, only a deep, resonant sadness. Vane takes one last breath, his lips moving in a final silent word. The lip readers later argue about what he said. Some say it was London. Others say it was silver. But the detective knows the truth. He said finally, "The mist killer is dead. The alchemist is dead." The 1992 cold case is, by every legal and forensic definition, closed. But as the screen fades to black, we hear the sound of the Thames, the constant rhythmic lapping of the tide against the ancient stone walls of the East End. The river is still there. The silver is still in the soil. And the fog is always just one temperature drop away from returning. The voiceover concludes with a chilling cinematic finality. We spent 34 years looking for the man in the fog. We found him. We judged him. We buried him. But as you walk through the streets of this city tonight, look at the shadows under the streetlights. Look at the silver reflection on the water. And ask yourself, is the mystery truly over? Or are we just waiting for the next alchemist to find the keys we left behind? The final image is a drone shot rising from the Thames, soaring over the illuminated skyline of the 2026 London, higher and higher until the city is just a glowing circuit of light in the dark heart of England. The sound of a silver coin hitting the floor, the 11th and final toll, rings out, followed by absolute silence. The silver is gone from the water, but the mercury has stained the memory of a generation. This is the final chapter, part 11, The Echoes of the Abyss. It is now 6 months after the death of Julian Vane, and the City of London is attempting to perform a collective exorcism. The yellow police tape has been replaced by commemorative wreaths, and the frantic hum of forensic drills has been succeeded by the somber quiet of a city in recovery. But for the investigators who lived in the shadow of the alchemist for 34 years, there is no such thing as a clean break. The 1992 cold case didn't just end. It metastasized into a permanent part of the urban legend. Every street corner in Wapping, every iron strut of the Blackfriars Bridge, and every glass pane of the Shard is now a witness to a history that was never supposed to be written. The task force in Lambeth is being disbanded, their mission officially accomplished. But the lead detective, the woman who looked into the alchemist's eyes and saw the blueprints of a nightmare, sits alone in the darkened office. She is surrounded by the digital ghosts of 56 lives. The final report is 10,000 pages long, a monument of data that attempts to quantify the unquantifiable. She looks at the apostle coins, the ones melted down to create the memorial plaques. She knows that silver doesn't just disappear. It changes form. It moves from a currency of death to a currency of remembrance. But as she scrolls through the final encrypted files found in Vane's cell, she finds a folder that was never presented in court. It is labeled simply, "The Successor." The blood runs cold in her veins. This wasn't a confession. It was an invitation. Vane's journals from his final months in Belmarsh reveal that he wasn't just counting the days until his death. He was corresponding. Not through letters but through the digital fog. The dark web forums where his legend had grown into a cult of personality. He had been mentoring someone. Not another Arthur Vance, not a blunt instrument of muscle and fear, but someone younger, smarter, someone who was born in the year 1992. Someone who sees the alchemist not as a monster but as a pioneer. Vane had sent the final key, not a physical coin but a cryptographic sequence, into the ether. The silver circuit was just the beginning. The next stage of the ritual doesn't require mercury. It requires data. The scene shifts to a small, nondescript apartment in the revitalized docks of East London. A young man, barely 30, sits in front of a curved 2026 monitor. He isn't looking at crime scenes. He's looking at the city's power grid. On his desk sits a single pristine silver Victorian crown, an 1892 original that was never part of the police inventory. He picks it up, the cold metal catching the blue light of the screen. He isn't a killer yet, but he is a student of the architecture of pain. He understands what Vane meant when he said the city is a body. He knows that the foundations are already laid. All he needs to do is turn on the lights. The architecture of the unseen. The investigation into the successor begins in total secrecy. The Metropolitan Police cannot risk another public panic. They have to hunt this new shadow while pretending the world is safe. The new signature. It's no longer about coins under tongues. It's about digital artifacts. Small, unerasable glitches left in the code of the city's autonomous transport systems. The new ritual. Vane's final journal speaks of the Great Synchronization. A moment where the physical city and the digital city are merged into a single, permanent monument. The new danger. While the alchemist was obsessed with the past, the successor is obsessed with the future. He doesn't want to preserve the fog. He wants to be the algorithm that controls it. The city continues to move, unaware of the new hunter in its midst. The shard glows in the night, its consecrated foundations a silent secret beneath the feet of thousands of office workers. The Thames barrier stands ready for the next storm, its manual override protocols now the standard operating procedure. But as the camera pans back, moving away from the lights of Canary Wharf and toward the dark, churning mouth of the estuary, the narrator's voice returns for one last, haunting reflection. We told you the case was closed. We told you the silver was melted. We told you the monster was dead. But in a city built on layers of blood and brick, the end is just the basement of a new beginning. The final shot is a cinematic masterpiece of tension. We see the lead detective walking out of the Lambeth headquarters for the last time. She pauses at the edge of the Thames, looking down at the mudflats. The tide is out. In the distance she sees a flicker of movement. A figure standing in the shadows of a derelict pier, watching her. She reaches for her phone but then stops. She realizes that the hunt never ends. It just changes names. The mist killer of 1992 was the ghost of the 20th century. The successor is the phantom of the 21st. The fog isn't a weather condition. It's the human condition. The screen starts to flicker. A subtle digital distortion that mimics the mist Vane tried to create. The audio begins to warp. The sound of the river turning into the rhythmic, metallic ticking of 1,000 Victorian watches. The names of the 56 victims scroll past one last time. But as they reach the end, a 57th name appears, then flickers out before it can be read. A new toll is being counted. A new coin is being minted. The cold case is no longer about the past. It is a prophecy of what is to come. London 1992, the narrator whispers. The year the world changed, and the year the silver started to flow. You can close the file. You can lock the door. You can bury the truth under 100 feet of concrete. But the Thames always finds a way in. And the silver never stays buried for long. The final image is the 1892 silver crown, held in the hand of the young man in the apartment. He flips it into the air. We see it spin in slow motion, heads, tails, until it disappears into the black of the screen. The sound of it hitting a hard metallic surface echoes once, twice, 3 times, and then absolute terrifying silence. The credits roll in a stark typewriter font, accompanied only by the distant, mournful sound of a foghorn on the river. The 34-year journey through the Mist Killer saga has come to its final destination, but the destination is just the starting line for the next nightmare. The cold case is closed. The new era has begun.